Jon Perry of the Stated Clearly website and YouTube channel creates animated videos about evolution. In his video titled, "What is the Evidence for Evolution?" he attempts to demonstrate how Neo-Darwinian evolution works by looking at whale evolution. This is an ambitious task, to say the least, because many difficult questions still have not been answered about how whales evolved, given the limitations of the Neo-Darwinian mechanism. And separately in his blog, Jon Perry also tries to address a lecture given by Richard Sternberg about whale evolution. In this video, we will examine the case for evolution presented by Jon Perry and see if the following claim from the end of his video is true. So, to sum things up, thousands of observable facts from completely independent fields of study are coming together to tell us the exact same story. All living things on Earth are related. Neo-Darwinism is not common descent. The ability of the Neo-Darwinian mechanism of natural selection acting on random mutations in the genome of an organism is what critics of Neo-Darwinism question. Some critics are also skeptical of common descent, but even some skeptics of Neo-Darwinianism are willing to accept that common descent may be correct. Jon Perry makes a common mistake. By not understanding the counter-arguments for evolution, he fails to address the concerns raised by the critics of evolutionary theory. That is, he only gives evidence for common descent and does not attempt to address the real question, that being, how does natural selection acting on random mutations create new genetic information? But we can still examine his claims to see if Jon Perry can at least supply sufficient support for common descent, which seems to be the real purpose of this video. Let's begin by examining the errors Jon Perry made in his video about whale evolution. We will also look at fundamental errors of understanding that Perry made in his blog about Richard Sternberg's lecture on whale evolution and population genetics. In the clearly stated video, they begin to make their case for evolution by using the study of embryology, stating that similarities of vertebrate embryos early in their development is evidence for Darwinian evolution. One of the pioneers of using embryology as evidence for evolution was Ernst Haeckel. It has been known for decades that Haeckel's evidence for evolution consisted of fraudulent drawings that overemphasized similarities earlier in fetal development. It is also true that at the very earliest stages of fetal development, fetuses were not more similar as Haeckel and Darwin believed, but were in fact quite different. Here we see Haeckel's original drawings. Here we see Haeckel's drawings compared to photos of actual embryos at the same stage of development. As you can see, the original evidence for evolution from embryology was fraudulent, and why this line of evidence is still embraced by evolutionists is puzzling. Also, it is important to note that this evidence is only applied to vertebrates and not other animals or plant phyla. It is highly subjective, as you can see from this slightly more accurate drawing of fetal development that is still being used in modern biology textbooks. In this section of his video, Jon Perry discusses the fossil evidence for whale evolution from Miacetus to Basilosaurus to modern whales, and for the most part, his facts are accurate. It is what he leaves out that is troubling. Perry fails to mention how long it took walking whales to evolve into modern whales. Here we see an example of a primate evolutionary tree. As you can see, hominids evolved and diverged from a common ancestor about 10 million years ago. Here is an example of an evolutionary tree showing whale evolution. As you can see, the time between Ambulocetus, a walking whale, and a relative to Miacetus that lived at roughly the same time is about 10 million years, about the same amount of time required for hominid evolution. So why did the minor changes needed for hominid evolution take about the same amount of time in the geologic record as the major and multitude of changes needed for whale evolution? Is it possible that it didn't? Jon Perry versus Dr. Richard Sternberg. Dr. Sternberg is an evolutionary biologist with degrees in molecular evolution and theoretical biology. Sternberg gave a brief 10-minute lecture about whale evolution and population genetics. He spent the first 2 minutes listing some examples of what would have been necessary for whale evolution to occur. But Sternberg is quick to point out that this is just a short list of the hundreds or even thousands of mutations that would be necessary for a walking whale to evolve into a fully aquatic male. Perry doesn't understand the argument. In his blog, Perry attempts to discredit Sternberg's lecture by focusing on the examples listed and then ignores the rest of Sternberg's lecture regarding population genetics. Again, Perry has made a basic mistake, thinking that the main point is about morphological changes necessary and not about the effectiveness of the Darwinian mechanism. Sternberg used a study about population genetics by Durrett and Schmidt that it would take 43 million years for two coordinated mutations to occur in whale population. And since we know that whales had only 10 million years to evolve, there simply was not enough time for whale evolution to occur given the hundreds or possibly thousands of mutations that would be needed. Here we see the cetacean countercurrent heat exchange system that Dr. Sternberg mentions in his lecture. Perry thinks that any countercurrent heat exchange system would be able to keep evolving male whales from being sterile because all mammals have a countercurrent heat exchange system. But it is this particular arrangement of veins and arteries and their connection to the blood from the whale's tail fluke that is necessary for male whales to produce viable sperm. Any old mammalian heat exchange system simply isn't sufficient. In his blog post, this is the first error that Jon Perry claims Sternberg has made in his lecture. But as you can see, Perry again simply fails to understand or is just ignoring the science he is trying to explain. Jon Perry fails. In this video, I have shown how Jon Perry simply doesn't understand the scientific concepts he is discussing. I have also shown that much of what he presents is based on misunderstanding of scientific concepts or is just plain wrong. Perry thinks that common descent proves evolution. It doesn't, and that whales could have evolved in 10 million years given what we know about mammalian anatomy and population genetics. They can't. There are other mistakes and errors that Perry makes in his video on evolution. This is not a comprehensive critique of his work.